Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second module of the Future of Business course. We're so excited that you're able to join us live for this webinar. And we're now 2 weeks in, and I've seen that many of you have introduced yourselves and you're making the effort to connect with each other and, of course, comment on the course platform as you go through all the material, which is really good. And remember that a large component of this course is the peer engagement. And we have people enrolled from companies in various industries and countries across the world. So it's a unique opportunity for you to network, to create partnerships, and of course, to learn that you really need to take advantage of these opportunities that you have to envision yourself as a change maker and as an entrepreneur. So while you might just see my face for now from the Ashoka side of things, you can rest assured that there's a hardworking team behind the scenes that's always available to help you on the platform. Specifically, my colleagues Isa and Andrea are ready to support you on this journey, and they can also assist with any technical issues you may have either during this webinar or later on. And if you have questions for our guest speaker, you can put those in the comment section right under this live webinar screen, and we'll try and have as many of them answered as we can, time allowing, of course. So if you're having any challenges with any technical parts of this webinar, please just refresh your page until that's sorted out. Or as I've mentioned, you can reach out to Andrea and Isa. And of course, today you are here because we are having the first of 3 live webinars, which are an integral part of this learning journey. We are streaming via YouTube and it's live, so there will be a slight delay or time lag between YouTube and the Novo 8 platform. So just be aware of that as we interact today. And of course, if there are any internet or connectivity challenges on my side, and if there's any glitch, don't worry, we will just continue as we're going along. So while we give it a few more minutes to allow everyone else to be able to connect and to join with us today, I want to let you know that you can earn extra points for watching this webinar live. And this applies to every other webinar on this course. So that means that while it's on, like right now, you should see a survey question at the bottom of the page, which is asking if you're watching live. So go ahead and just click yes. And if you don't see that question during the session, again, just try refreshing it and I'm sure it will come up. So this week, we've been on module 2 of the course, and we've been looking at the various elements that introduce us to social entrepreneurship and the corporate world. And that's, of course, where you're all coming from. So here to walk us through this and other topics is Heiko Spitzek. Now, he's a professor at Fundação Dom Cabral in Brazil, and he heads the Sustainability Management Research Center there. His teaching experience includes courses on social entrepreneurship, as well as sustainable business for MSc, MBA, and executive MBA students. Heiko has worked with senior executives, directors, and board members, aligning sustainability and strategy at several of the world's biggest companies. His teaching is informed by more than 10 years of consulting experience, as well as academic research, and his publications have appeared in numerous international journals. He's also a catalyst for the region in Brazil for the Global League of Entrepreneurs. And I could go on, but Heiko, it's a very warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Sharon, and thanks for Ashoka for having me. I'm looking really forward to our conversation today.
Absolutely. So let's kick it right off with you telling us a little bit about your own professional journey and of course getting into your role as the director of the Sustainability Management Research Center.
Well, I think I was always navigating between academia and practice. Um, at the end of my studies, I joined Accenture. I wasn't really happy with the practice, and I was reflecting on philosophy and business. I decided to do my PhD in Switzerland at the University of St. Gallen in the business ethics department. And the question I was asking is, what, if anything, do corporations learn from NGO critique? And I looked at 2 cases, which is one is the old Nestle case that Nestle was challenged on its infant formula marketing practices, especially in Africa. And the other was the Citigroup project finance practices which caused destruction of the rainforest, infringement of human rights, etc., etc. And the question was like, how and if do corporations learn from that critique posed by the NGOs? And what I learned in that research was it always happens that you needed some internal person in the corporation who could do this translation work. So they're change makers, like potentially all of you who are listening to us today. Um, and they were able to translate the NGO language into what the businesses needed to do and understood that this impact sales, that will impact reputation, that will impact the partnerships they're about to do, that will impact cost of capital, etc. And they could translate the corporate talk back to the NGO world in order to get out of that conflictive environment. And then I found a publication by Sustainability, which talked about social entrepreneurs. And I got really intrigued because in my PhD, I saw people doing these changes because there was a lot of pressure from the outside of the organization. So media campaigns against the company, etc., etc. And suddenly there appears this entrepreneur who's doing that in companies, not because they're criticized, but because it allows the person to bring its values to work, and to use the company as a platform for change, as long as it is able to articulate how does this make sense to business. Um, And then after my PhD, I worked 2 years in the UK where we published this book with David Grayson. And then I moved to Brazil, and I think I'm here now at Fundação Dom Cabral. And if you believe the Financial Times, we're one of the top 10 business schools worldwide. We work a lot with executives, and this gives me a very privileged role to work with big corporations here in Brazil, like Nestle, BSF, and others to help these companies harvest the potential of entrepreneurs within their organizations, do better business, and create impact at the same time.
Mm. Well, that sounds really, it's a really exciting position to be in. And it's interesting when you mentioned the critique, let's put it in quotation marks, from the NGO world. And I wonder why there's sometimes that love-hate relationship between them. Um, could you provide any insights, any personal reflections on that? Why are they at odds?
I think like their primary objectives conflict most of the times, and no conflict most of the times, but the NGOs look for impact and the companies look for profit.
Right.
And I think that creates two different worlds and two different approaches and two different mindsets that that can cause a lot of trouble for people who go into the section. So there was a guy who worked for the NGOs and then moved to Nestlé during the infant formula crisis, um, to carve out a space in between.
Mhm.
He lost all his friends in the NGO world because he said, like, you're selling your soul to the corporate environment. And he didn't make new friends in the corporate world because they said, like, you're a tree hugger, what are you doing here? Um, but if we look at it honestly, I think like both organizations always need to do both. Like, if you're hurting the environment too much, you're gonna be penalized either by law, either by consumers, either by anybody. And if the NGOs don't make profits and don't get funding, it's over.
Right.
So what I see recently more is like the NGOs are trying to get more income by offering services to other organizations, which makes them a little bit more company. and companies investing in ESG, sustainability, and impact, which makes them a little bit more NGO. So um, I hope that most of us here can agree that there is no hard line between one and the other, and that we need more people who can look at both things at the same time, impact and
Right.
profit.
Absolutely. So I think that that brings us to social entrepreneurship, right? And this is where there's that attempt to bridge that gap and to bring those two worlds together. So maybe you can just explain to us what social entrepreneurship means to you. Of course, we've looked at it in the course, we've read a lot of different articles, but in your experience, what does that mean really?
I think social entrepreneurs are driven, and they're always like, what's what's the means and what's the end? I think traditional business and most of the executives we are working with um, are reflecting on how do I use social and environmental issues in order to be a more successful, more profitable organization. Um, and there are some who think about how can I use business in order to improve the social and environmental conditions of our time. And it's an inversion of means and ends. And that leads to a very different way of looking at the world. And I think the most prominent example of looking how we can use business in order to improve the state of the world is Muhammad Yunus, who invented the microcredit and created the Grameen Bank, um, and brought millions of people in Bangladesh out of poverty. And in classes, I always ask people, anybody who founded a bank and because of founding a bank got the Peace Nobel Prize? And most people look at me like, you're crazy.
Mm.
But there's this person, he founded a bank, and because of the bank, he and Grameen obviously together got the Peace Nobel Prize. So my challenge to the executives is always like, why don't you bring that kind of thinking in your organization? Because and this is also the challenge I'm positioning here to our participants today. Like, I would love to see your face on the cover of Forbes magazine because you did a project which made billions of dollars for your organization. And at the same time, and for the same project, you're getting the Peace Nobel Prize. So, in case this happens and you're inspired by this course, um, I don't want to have any part of the Peace Nobel Prize money. But if you go to Oslo and you do the welcome address that you get the Peace Nobel Prize, you might start your conversation saying it all started back then with Heiko Spitzek and the Ashoka course that challenged me to be here one day.
Right, right. I'm sure they've taken note of that. Okay. So I think you've laid a good foundation for social entrepreneurship. So let's move to entrepreneurship. I know on the course platform, we already had a question from, I think it's Xuan Bin. If I mispronounce any names, please forgive me in advance. But I think he was very eager to put the question, and it was based basically on the idea of what really is the difference between entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship, especially when you put the word social in front of it.
Yeah. Like, let's stay with the entrepreneurship part, like Yunus. He founded Grameen Bank in 1976. He got the Peace Nobel Prize in 2006, so it took 30 years. In 2006, Grameen had about 7.5 million customers, out of which they got 2 million out of poverty. Amazing story, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they're not customers. It's a cooperative. So they are owners, customers, and everything at the same time. Now, there were two employees at Vodafone in Kenya who realized that, man, only 20% of the population here have access to financial services because these banks don't want to see these poor people in their agencies.
Yeah.
But 60% of these guys have a mobile phone. And like today this is normal, but we're talking 2006, 2007, more or less the time when Yunus got the Peace Nobel Prize. And they say like, what if the typical question of entrepreneurs is like, what if we use Vodafone, our network, in order to help people to send and receive money, just like sending and receiving text messages? Because imagine like you're living in Kenya, you're a successful son, daughter of a poor family. You want to support your family in the countryside, and somebody has to pick up the physical money from your hand, get to the countryside, and give it to your parents. You
Yeah.
know, and now you can do this like a text message. You think that people would use this service? Man, they did.
Mm.
First year they had 1 million new customers. The service M-Pesa now is serving like more than 50 million people all over Africa. And if I remember right, like on the system in 2022, they transferred $317 billion.
Wow.
And this example shows for me the potential of entrepreneurship. Like if you can leverage a platform like Vodafone to create common good, in that sense, financial inclusion,
Yeah.
scaling is like this. So
Right.
this makes it really amazing. And that got me all fired up for entrepreneurship. I don't think it's the only solution. I think we need entrepreneurs, and everybody else. But I'm really excited about the potential entrepreneurship brings to turn corporations into platforms for a positive future.
Mhm. Right. Okay, so let's talk about something that we read in the module this week, and one of the articles that was actually posted is an excerpt from a book that you wrote, and I think you've just referred to it as well. You co-wrote with David Grayson and Melody McLaren. It's called Social Entrepreneurism and All That Jazz. So in that article, you gave several really good definitions of a social entrepreneur, and one of them that struck me is that a social entrepreneur is two-thirds change maker and one-third troublemaker. So can you just share with us the thinking behind that and how does one survive being a troublemaker?
Yeah, that's a more tricky question, like how to survive. But I
Right.
think the quote is taken from Gib Bullock. Gib was working at Accenture, and like many entrepreneurs, like he had no clue what was coming for him because he was like millions of people every day taking the tube in London, and then suddenly looking at the newspaper, he saw an ad for Voluntary Social International, I think it's called the organization, and they were asking for business executives to volunteer in ex-Yugoslavia to help small and medium businesses with their business plan to ramp up the economy. And he was like, first he was puzzled. He was like, I thought like development work is for nurses and doctors and, teachers, business people like me. Um, but then like he said like, let's give it a shot. And he got a sabbatical from Accenture. He went there, was a life-changing experience. And he said, like, how can I replicate that for others in my organization? And that's where the idea of Accenture Development Partnerships was born. So the idea is basically bringing the power of Accenture Consulting and Technology to help NGOs create bigger impacts. And he sold it to he sold the idea in the following way. He wrote a fake Financial Times article, sent it to his CEO, and in this article, the CEO was positioned in the future at a meeting at the World Economic Forum, where his CEO gets a prize for having installed that kind of program. That got Gib to a lunch conversation. And in that lunch conversation, he convinced the CEO that that might be a good idea. And then they founded Accenture Development Partnerships. Now, what does this have to do with the quote here, two-thirds change maker, one-third troublemaker? Um, and Portuguese is even more accurate in describing like most of the positions where you guys are right now. We're not talking about employees here, we call them functionaries because you function within an organization. It's all organized, somebody organizes, gives you a function and a
Mm,
work description, and you do what's in that work description. You need to function.
yeah.
Now, Gip came back and worked and functioned again within Accenture. But part of his time, he was thinking out about the project. And he was like, how do I convince the CEO? How do I start Accenture development partnerships? How do I do carve out time for this? And of course, his immediate manager was not happy because he stopped to function like he did before because some of the time went into his entrepreneurial venture. And this is where, like, the corporate immune system normally gets activated and it's like virus, isolate and eject.
Right.
So, like another way of putting this is you can't stick in and drive change at the same time. So you become a troublemaker. You become somebody who stops at least partially functioning until potentially the organization understands that what you create is valuable and then creates a position for you. So he became head of Accenture Development Partnerships, something which didn't exist before.
Yeah. So I can see how that can be taken as a malfunction, and yet it's just functioning differently or in a new role or in a new way.
Exactly. But you need to convince
Yeah.
the whole organization that that makes sense and they should pay you salary for that. And that is another difference for entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs. I'm an entrepreneur at Fundação Cabral. I try to like innovate. But you know what? I get my salary, I have my benefits, and I'm playing with the money of others. Cool, you
Right.
know? And if it fails, I can become an entrepreneur and I have the skills I need in order to set my own company because I know how to do it already.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So I'm seeing a question that we have from someone who's already done some homework on you, and they preempted my next question, which is going to be to talk about your new book. So Ariane Chavez is asking, could you talk about your book? So she's given the okay, so Corporate Hero's Journey. But it's Os Rebeldes. I'm gonna try it. Os Rebeldes
Ah,
Corporativos. Please tell me the correct way of saying that.
that's Rebeldes Corporativos. This is the English
Okay,
version and this is the
right.
this is the Portuguese version. I couldn't do it
Okay,
Corporate Rebels because it's a protected trademark in the US already. And they
okay,
have a cool site on LinkedIn and they do cool stuff and I need to get in touch with them. So I don't know if anybody knows them. I think they are really doing cool stuff. But here in Brazil I could, so I, changed to Corporate Rebels. Um,
okay,
I think there are a lot of similarities with the previous book on social entrepreneurism and all that jazz. But I was experimenting to do a book which is more edutainment. So
okay.
it's short chapters, 3, 4, 5 pages maximum. It's inspiring cases and it has some tools. And it follows what many entrepreneurs describe for me a methodology or a way of thinking that deeply resonates with them, which is the corporate hero's journey, which is based on like a work from Joseph Campbell. He wrote a book which is called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And he was an anthropologist and comparative methodologist. And he said, like, basically all the big stories follow all the same pattern. And it's
Mhm.
17 stages.
Okay.
Um, and George Lucas, when he created Star Wars, he read the book, he was inspired, and he followed the stages by heart. So the book presents the stories and the evolutions of some of the entrepreneurs along their journey, there's always a section, okay, Campbell says about the hero's journey this. In Star Wars, you recognize it like this. And I know an entrepreneur at this stage did the following. So the story, taking some of the passes of the hero's journey. The first step is the call to adventure. So when I don't know if you know Star Wars, like there's a little robot. Luke Skywalker is charged in repairing the robot, and suddenly he discovers a hidden message where a princess is asking somebody for help. And that catapults him into the adventure. Just like the moment when Gib was reading his Financial Times and got about the message of the voluntary overseas international organization.
Mhm.
So I don't know if like some of you already had your call to adventure, which led you to do this course. Or if this course is becoming your call of adventure, it's like, man, do something useful with your life, make money, and use your company as a platform for change. Especially if you
Yeah.
work for IKEA. I know like a lot of guys here at IKEA. This is an amazing platform for doing stuff. And you have all the support from your leadership to do this, you know? But after the call of adventure, there's another phase which is called the road of trials. You know?
Mhm.
So how do I sell this idea of Accenture development partnerships to my boss? I'll do a fake FT article. How do I prepare for the lunch session? No, I don't know. Like, what's this guy interested about? Like, who's he listening to? What's the company strategy? Like, how do I connect to this? How do I convince that? Do I need to get the head of HR on board because it's basically an employee attraction proposition? How do we finance this? Road of trials. Then there
Mhm.
comes the belly of the whale. It's another like very important stage where your old being employee functionary dies. It dies. It's over. And you become entrepreneur and you assume your new position. Like that's when Gib became head of Accenture Development Partnerships officially launched in the organization. And then maybe the last stage is like being the master of the two worlds, the world of impact and the world of business. You manage them
Mhm.
both and you can play with both at the same time, something like very few people are managing to do.
Mhm. Mhm.
So this is a little bit the story of the book, and it helps people to identify where am I on my journey and what can I do and who can inspire me to move forward.
Mhm. Okay. It sounds like a must read. I'm sure we can find it online, right?
Yes, you can find it online and it's on Kindle and then Amazon, etc., etc. And I'm looking for more cases right now because I gave the book to a friend of mine who's a film director, and we're trying to set up a documentary um,
Mm.
showcasing really cool, interesting stories about entrepreneurs and getting out of our bubble of sustainability and impact people to make that more appealing to a general audience and basically say like, you could be an entrepreneur, not sure if you knew, but there might be a more meaningful life waiting for you.
Right, right. Okay, sounds very interesting and exciting. So I'm looking forward to see how that pans out. But Heiko, we have another question from Beatrice, and she says, "What's from your perspective? What skills should entrepreneurs develop to challenge established ways of working within organizations and to create social value alongside economic value?"
Okay, if like had a very complete answer of this, I think that would be very powerful, but I have some hints, like
Mhm.
I think the first thing, the first and one of the most important skills is communication, which starts
Mhm.
with deep listening.
Right.
Like when we do entrepreneurship programs, We ask people like, who are the people you need to convince in order to make this idea happen? And the natural intention of the entrepreneurs then is to say like, okay, I go there and sell my idea. And we say like, no, 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 no. You have a conversation with the person, but you're prohibited. You cannot talk about your idea. You first listen. What
Right.
are your objectives? What keeps you awake at night? If I would give you $100 million, where would you invest that? Who are the stakeholders most important to you? What is your bonus linked to? Which KPIs do you need to meet? Um,
Mhm.
where do you see yourself in the future? How do you think you're gonna get there? Et cetera, et cetera. You collect this and you talk zero about your project. And then you come back at the second time and you think like, I thought really hard about what you told me, and I think there's a way I can help you to achieve your goals. So I think like first is the deep listening, and the second is taking your ego out of the equation.
Right.
Eh, Often it's your idea, but as an entrepreneur, and this is a big difference to entrepreneurs, if your idea doesn't become a strategic project of the company, it's not gonna work. So
Mm.
it's not your idea at the end. It is, but if you push your ego into the way, very bad for your idea to be adopted by the organization. The best is to
Mhm.
make somebody the hero of your idea that really can have leverage and make that and take that to the next level. So I think, listening, communication, and taking your ego out of the way are a couple of things you can do. Um, Within the book, we have a methodology in the chapter 7, which helps you map the the organizational political environment on two
Mhm.
dimensions.
Mhm.
The first reflection is like, how powerful is the person? High power, low power. And the other reflection is like, how do they potentially see my project? Are they against it or are they in favor? The people who are high power and in favor of your project, these are your sponsors. Without them, it's not going to happen. So you need to convince them, you need to engage them, you need to keep them updated on what you're doing, problems you're facing, etc., etc. The other category, which is really important, are the people who are having a lot of power, but they're against your idea.
Mhm.
So you need to think about, do I fly under the radar? Can I convince them over? Or can I distract them in any way? Or can I overvote them with the majority of the board, then overvoting them because I briefed them to do so? And there's another category like the two powers, like low power in favor of your project. You need to engage them to say, like, this is not just me, but this is us.
Right.
And a lot of people fall in the last quadrant, which are low power and against your project. And a lot of
Mhm.
entrepreneurs waste resources and energy on them, which is not necessary. You can simply ignore those folks because they don't have any power. They're
Yeah.
just nagging. So forget about them. Even if they nag loud, you know, but ignore it. Focus your energy because as an entrepreneur, you have to struggle with the daily like tasks you need to do and the project you want to get off the floor.
Mhm. Okay. I think those are some very useful skills for you, Beatrice, and everyone else. We have another question that we'll move on to from Daniela, who says, how can we encourage the next generation or younger professionals to challenge established ways of working inside organizations? School systems, including business schools, can be very rigid and they make it harder to challenge the status quo.
Yeah. That's a very good question, and I love that because it's a leadership question. Like, it's a question that's like maybe I'm not the entrepreneur,
Hmm.
but I can leverage them.
Yeah.
The best way, like, and we done this at BSF, for example, here in Brazil, is to challenge them, um, to bring in their ideas. So if you have a structured entrepreneurial program, this is something we did at BSF. And the way we did this is we first listened to the senior leadership team. We're not asking them directly about sustainability, but we ask the CEO and some of the vice presidents, like, okay, where's business going? What are the tendencies? What are you concerned about? What keeps you awake at night? If I give you a lot of money, where would you put it? Uh, in order to, in the second part of the interview, then go to say, like, okay, what are, like, how do social environmental issues influence that strategy in your perception? And what are the important topics? So the last time we did that, the CEO said like, okay, regenerative agriculture, climate change, and circular economy are on the top of our priority list. It's like, great, okay, so we launched the entrepreneurs program. We said like, okay, folks, you can bring in any idea, but know that if you have something like linked to climate change, circular economy, and regenerative agriculture, that's gonna fit to strategy more smoothly and it's got a lot of higher chances to be implemented. Then we let these people to identify ideas, create a business case, think about the impact logic. How do you measure impact? How do you measure business? How do you do storytelling? And in the first stage, they presented a 5-minute video pitch to us to say, like, okay, this is my idea, this is how it makes sense to business, and this is how I resolve the problem. This pitch, together with an evaluation form, went directly to the boss, who would be the person who approves or disapproves the project. If they liked it, these folks went into an acceleration program in order to then present to the senior management team. And in that moment, we could say, like, you told us climate change is important. Here are 5 proposals of climate change, and this is how they make sense to your business. So you got the whole, like, you get it from leadership and you bring it back to leadership precisely the way they wanted it to be.
Hmm.
So that was amazing.
Hmm.
But you don't have to have that formal program. Like if you're like, if you think like, okay, I'm not working in HR and you can do this with your team. You can do this, with a small group the same way. And if you do it right, it's gonna create visibility that other departments will be looking at you like, man, why are your people so engaged? Why are they working more? Why are they bringing in innovative projects? And then you can say like, well, you can learn from me or you make me your boss and I'll show you, you know? So normally
Yeah.
this is also good for personal careers.
Mm. Okay. So from what you're saying, Heiko, it sounds like one very good way is to create a structured pathway for younger professionals to get into social entrepreneurship to present opportunities to them. And I think there's also a lot to be said for a culture shift. And I think that's something that some companies do struggle with because innovation doesn't just happen in a vacuum, in isolation, right? It has to be a byproduct of a certain environment. So, what kind of an environment is required in a workspace to foster diversity, to reward that creativity? What will it take as well to achieve that kind of culture shift within a company?
In the League of Entrepreneurs, we learn to distinguish 2 types of entrepreneurs, like the entrepreneurs who work on market-based solutions, new products, services, business models, new processes, etc., etc., which we call like the entrepreneurs in a stricter sense.
Mhm.
The people who work on culture, we call catalysts
Okay.
because they try to create an environment which is more open and propensive to all kind of entrepreneurs.
Mm.
I found these people normally in the sustainability and innovation department. And what they are trying to do is to get a program like the one I mentioned, off the ground and do the internal articulation which is necessary in order to create value for the different parts of the organization. Um, Changing culture is a very hard and long-term game. So if you're a catalyst and you are in a not propensive culture, be prepared for a long, rough ride, and you need a lot of resilience. So make sure you meditate, do sports, take care of yourself because it's a marathon. It's not a
Mhm.
sprint.
Mhm.
Um, Ideally, like at BASF, what happened? We had a CEO who was in favor of this. We had the VP of Sustainability and Institutional Relations backing that. We had the whole sustainability team and we had the innovation team supporting that. Wow. You know, so Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Mhm. Yeah,
So the culture is really important. And a friend of mine said, like, and who serves breakfast? The leadership team.
right.
Like, and there's a note of caution here. I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs with burnout because of changing leadership teams. So they sell their project again and again and again and then over again. Um, and sometimes market conditions change. And I think we're at one of these moments right now where ESG is going down the drain. Geopolitical realities are changing very fast. Some countries are deprioritizing diversity, sustainability, renewable energy, etc., etc. So it's a very tougher environment. Um, and a lot of leadership positions are now going back to a more business as usual, short-term resilience, cost effectiveness approach,
Mhm.
um, which is understandable and I think that makes the work of some of the catalysts more challenging in that sense. So potentially you should do an evaluation if it's worth the fight. If it's worth the fight and you have some allies, powerful allies, you need to align the allies in order to help you. And then I think, of course, I'm biased because I work in that space, but I think if you have an entrepreneurial program, which even if you take the impact question out of the equation, but shows that what you're doing is delivering value, cost reductions, new revenues, lower risks, cheaper cost of capital because you can access ESG funds, etc., etc., then no matter what, they're going to support you.
Mhm.
But it's going to be
Yeah.
harder. Like it's going to be harder than working in an organization where you have people who understand profit and purpose at the same time.
Mm. So what you've just been saying, I think, also answers a question that we have from Olivia, who's saying, from your experience with executives, when do they tend to be most open to entrepreneurship? And you've just been talking about some of the
Okay.
key things that they would look for.
Yeah.
But anything else to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. Like there's a lot. But best way is like when the company is growing.
Okay.
Company is growing and has a strong value fundament from the founders. So one of my cases is Joe da Silva from Arup International. Arup is a construction company. They did the Sydney Opera House, for example. And she founded Arup International Development for disaster relief. She built refugee camps, etc., etc. And when she brought the idea to Arup to build this international development part of the business to help cities to build more resilient, be prepared for climate change, etc., etc. She
Mhm.
strongly built it on the values of like the value charter of the founder, which is a very strong fundament. So if the company is growing,
Mhm.
has a strong fundament, and then there's like another good window of opportunity. If you have a long-term CEO who has interest in impact
Mhm.
and is concerned about his or her legacy, shortly before retirement, they give a shit about shareholders because they are more like they have been there a long time. They have been mincemeated by the system. And they say, like, I'm shortly before retirement. I want to give back. I want to leave a legacy which goes beyond a well-managed company. And if
Right.
you get this CEO at this moment of time and you bring an idea which helps this person leave a legacy, done.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. We have another question from Vanessa, who says, how can entrepreneurs scale social impact in large organizations with competing priorities? Can you share more about the business advantage of entrepreneurship, or the business case for entrepreneurship?
Mm. Very good question as well. Like, when I pitch entrepreneurial programs to companies, we usually fall between different chairs. Like my normal contact as like director of a sustainability research center is the sustainability department, which has no power and no budget
Mhm.
normally. But I tell them like I help you position yourself not as the compliance and but we need to look for the butterflies and protect the environment, but as an innovation hub within the company, turning the challenges you have into business opportunities. So this is my pitch to the sustainability folks. Then there's a pitch to the human relations people. They say like, you got a lot of young people who don't want to work for you because you're just paying salary and they're not buying into a life lost in the office compensated by salary at the end of the month anymore. So our program helps you to let these people take their values to work and transform your company into a platform for positive change as long as it makes sense to business as well. So you challenge them as well, you know? Then there's the innovation folks, and there's clear evidence that the things we do, like entrepreneurship, adds to the innovation pipeline, adds to new products and services in the product portfolio, adds to sustainable products in the product portfolio, which potentially can have a higher margin than their competitors.
Mhm.
And there are the finance guys that if there's an opportunity to lower your risk profile for environmental and social issues or having a positive advantage so you can access ESG funds, which provides them a cheaper cost of capital, they're going to be happy as well. The problem I always see is you create a little value for each of one of them. So if I come with my program and like as we are top school, we're not that cheap. They like everybody says like, but I can't pay this. And like, okay, how about you articulate and switch the bill, like split the bill with your others? And this is normally not happening within organizations. But there are different values you can explore with your ideas and how entrepreneurship generates value. We have done an analysis with 400 Brazilian companies, and we found solid evidence that A, innovation. Companies who have entrepreneurship programs, they generate more ideas, they implement more ideas, they have a higher version of new products and services in their product portfolio, and they have more sustainable products in their product portfolio. So innovation, there
Mhm.
is no doubt.
Mhm.
Client, we've seen that the client retention for organizations who have entrepreneurship programs have a higher client retention rate. They also have better organizational climate, and they report a higher way of using sustainability for cost reductions. They have report better reputation, and they report they have cheaper cost of capital.
Mhm. Okay.
So yeah,
Okay.
hope this helps.
And so I mean, all in all, there is a very strong business case for social entrepreneurship. And I think, I mean,
The thing is, it is a medium long-term case, and this is the
Yeah.
problem. Like you need
Right. Right.
to invest at the beginning, and then 3, 4 years later, it turns into something interesting.
Right. Okay. No, thank you for that. Well, we're fast heading to the top of the hour, so please do keep your questions coming, and we'll try and squeeze in as many as we can. But Heiko, I wanted to just pick your brain on some of the strategies that those that are watching can employ in terms of managing the bureaucracy and anticipating some of the resistance that they'll probably face from within the system when they're trying to innovate. Obviously, you've seen a lot of people go through different challenges and obstacles and so on. And it would be great if you can speak to some of these and then also link
Mm.
to the League of Entrepreneurs and how that's also been useful.
Yeah. Well, like let's go with the challenges. You know, organizations and functionaries are there to work the normal way of business.
Mhm.
So if you provoke change, you need to convince powerful actors that this change is necessary and they support you in the most critical moments.
Yeah.
And this is not always easy. I remember one entrepreneur at BMW Group who was in the first team of building electric vehicles. He said, like, the moment we stepped out and we said, we're going to construct electric vehicles, 98% of the organizations were, 98% of the organization were our enemy because everybody
Right.
built their career, their expertise, their everything on combustion engines. And these were engineers proud about being the heroes of engines. And now you say like, you want to do an electric car? We not broom broom, you know? So th in that moment, you need backup by the leadership team and say like, no, this is a strategic priority, and we're gonna do this. Um,
Mhm.
Now, how do you get this backup? One part we already touched about. If you have the founders, if you have the family owners, if you have the board, if you have the CEO behind you, and they're firm and they're not the only one, ideally you have like 3 or 4 people backing you up there, it's gonna happen. No way. Now, if they're not on board,
Mhm.
what can you do in order so they can't say no anymore to you? If you have a paying client at your side, a client who says like, I like that solution, I want to test it, and I'm up for paying for it. No boss will stop you there, especially if the client is an important one.
Mhm.
So at BASF, we always were joking like, it either comes from Germany or it comes from the client.
Right.
And coming to the League of Entrepreneurs, I've seen many, many times people coming to the first round of discussion at the League of Entrepreneurs and said like, I finally understood who I am and that I'm not alone. I always thought I'm the odd one swimming against the stream in my organization. You know, I'm the only one thinking about environmental impacts. I'm only the only one talking about justice or like LGBT or like whatever it is like you're interested about. You feel alone and you feel like, there's nothing you can do. And suddenly you come into a group of people who all think exactly like you and they can give you really good advice on how to move forward. Or when you're passing a hard time, they give you a hug. That's the League of Entrepreneurs.
Wow.
As the journey is not an easy one, but a very rewarding one, it's good to have a league by your side who helps you every now and then to recharge your batteries and get some good advice from friends.
Yeah, totally agreed. I think that's one of the most important things that you can do to surround yourself or to create a community of support
Yeah.
around you and your ideas as well. So, Heiko, we've talked about a lot, and I know we could probably talk about a lot more. We could go on for another hour plus, but we have run out of time. But would you have any parting advice for all the aspiring entrepreneurs who are watching?
Yeah. Well, like if you don't go, you don't know. So um, I work at a business school. We do MBAs, we do other courses. But if I look at the entrepreneurs, if you try to drive change within the organization, you're going to learn much more than any MBA could potentially tell you. And you have a
Mhm.
motivation to do so. I remember one of my friends, she worked, and this is the beginning of the 2000s, she worked at McKinsey in Madrid. And she was gathering colleagues to talk about environment sustainability, and her organizational environment, to say the least, was not very open to this. So they called themselves the Mec Raros, the Mec Strange, you know, because they were like in there, but they were like feeling like it's not fitting, and it was a very conservative environment. But they started to discuss and reached out to other offices around the world. It's like, what are you doing? Sustainability, la la la. And then when Ian Davis, the then CEO, created the first climate change initiative at McKinsey, he called people to London. They applied. Everybody went to London. Um, and and before that, like my friend, she said, like, I think I'm gonna quit. Like I'm not fitting in here. It's not working. And
Mhm.
in that moment, I told her, like, Clara, no, stop. Stay. Try to
Mhm.
drive change. Try to push really hard because the worst that can happen is that you learn a lot and you get fired, which is something you wanted in the first place. So
Okay.
if you're in that position, and I hope at our IKEA friends potentially not, but if you're in a company where you feel like, I think I've seen it and it's not working, push really hard. If it's not working, the organizational immune system will isolate you and kick you out. If it's working, it's going to be amazing, because you're going to drive change, get a salary, get promoted, and do awesome stuff. So throw yourself in there and enjoy the ride.
Okay, well, I think that's a very high note to end on. So, with that, I'd like to thank you for joining us, Heiko. You've given us so many rich insights into the world of social entrepreneurship, and I'm sure you wouldn't mind if people reach out to you on
No, I'm on
LinkedIn or any
LinkedIn
other
if you
platform.
want to be in touch. Looking forward to stories. If you have any recommendations for people who should be appearing in my Netflix series, reach out to me, please.
Fantastic. Sounds exciting. Thank you so much, Heiko, for spending your time with us. We really appreciate it. And
Thank
many
you.
thanks to all of you. And many thanks to all of you as well who've been watching this webinar live and those who also watch it recorded. And I hope today's session has really helped to give you a better understanding of social entrepreneurship and the amazing opportunities and benefits that it holds for private corporations. So make time to read through and reflect on this week's course material so that you can go deeper on this subject and have a really strong foundation to build on in the upcoming modules. And remember, it's a safe space for learning, so you will get out of it what you put in. So let's continue to discuss and engage meaningfully on the various course topics. And feel free to throw in your own personal experiences. We always love reading about those. And of course, we know that AI can be useful, but in this case, we really want to hear more of your own personal reflections and observations as a human being in the corporate world. So thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your week and goodbye.